in this occasion is words beyond the words, communicative sustainability, and we are exploring how to communicate the effort of sustainable ecological practice from an artistic point of view, organizational point of view, and how to be factual, avoid the negativity, and at the same time being of inspiration. Sorry, all these moving chairs made me a little bit. Without further ado, we have amazing guests, and I will start with Lisa Fitzsimons, that is the Strategy and Sustainability Lead at the Irish Museum of Modern Art, where she leads an implementation of the IMMA 5-year strategy and produces the Earth Rising, the annual festival exploring the intersection of contemporary art, ecological innovation, and community resilience that is starting next Friday. With a background in brand and communication leadership across cultural, corporate, and non-profit sector, she is passionate about using storytelling to deepen understanding, shift mindsets, and inspire action. Her work bridges strategy, creativity, and public engagement, demonstrating how cultural institution can be a powerful platform for climate communication and change. And we have, in alphabetical order, Noel Kelly, that is the Chief Executive Officer of Visual Artists Ireland, a role that is held since 2007, and is a Life Fellow of Royal Society of Encouragement of Art, Manufacture and Commerce, and serves on the International Programming Panel for Cukrarna in Ljubljana. He acts as a policy expert on a number of local government committees. His governance portfolio includes previous board roles with the Irish Visual Artists' Right Organisation, the Butler Gallery, the Royal Dublin Society, and under his stewardship, VAI launched initiative, I'm reading, so yeah, such as the Get Together, that is next week, and the National Day for Visual Artists, the Social, Economic and Fiscal Status for Survey, the Payment Guidelines for Visual Artists, and the Job Seeker Allowance for Visual Artists. Noel advocacy focuses on equitable treatment of artists and expanding networking and development opportunities that support artists at every career stage. His most recent project, the develop of the Visual Artists Bill of Rights, research into Workspace Ireland, and the ongoing development of a green approach to the visual artist. Last but not least, Gareth Kennedy, a visual artist at work. His work explores the social agency of the handcrafted in the 20th century and generates community of interest around the production and performance of experimental material culture. Informed by anthropological approach, these works draw on layered history of a location. Projects are embedded and evolve over time and are enacted in diverse publics and individuals. His practice to date include public art commission, workshops, educational projects, exhibition, residencies and collaboration, and he's a lecturer of sculpture and expanded practice at the NCAD in Dublin. Since 2020, he is lead coordinator of the NCAD field, a site beside the college, which through radical pedagogies is being appraised as a novel ecology, a taskscape, and an experimental durable commons. Kennedy runs accredited courses at undergraduate level, and together with the artists and colleagues Jodino Sullivan and Mark Lair, runs the Creative Future Academy professional certificate and diploma in art and ecology. In 2024-2025, he's a urban field artist in residence as part of the International Museum of Commons Climate Assembly, and was the president artist of RISM residency in Kilkenny Art Office, which performed part of the research into the roots for Future Climate Art Assembly, and is a member of the All Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network. So, quite guests. Thank you for coming. I would like to start with a question for each of you. and then anything that comes from the audience is very welcome, and we'll see how it goes from the answers. Lisa, you are an expert in communication, various sectors. Your work at IMMA brings together strategy, storytelling, public engagement through projects like Earthrising, of course. From your perspective, how can cultural institutions communicate sustainability in a way that is avoiding doom narratives, but still remaining honest and impactful? And if you can please explain your philosophy, that I'm very curious to know.
Yeah, sure. And I'm just talking to this, and I tend to talk with my hands, so hopefully the sound won't be too wild.
Yes, this will be recorded for the people that are not able to be here just today. They are far away. Thank you.
So I guess I'll start with the role that art can play in communicating about the climate crisis, or the earth crisis, as we like to call it, because it's more than just climate, it's biodiversity loss, it's pollution. So, you know, for years and years, we've relied on scientists and data to tell us about the damage and the harm that we're doing to the earth. And while science and data are clearly and obviously very, very critical and important, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to connect emotionally with hard facts, hard data, hard science. So I think art can play a really powerful role in emotionally resonating with audiences. So throughout my career, working in communications, no matter what the organisation is, or the brand, or the individual, or the institution, ultimately when you put a communications plan in place, the question you need to ask yourself is, how do I want people to feel after this? So what's the emotion that I want people to walk away with? And I know that might sometimes be an unusual question for an artist to ask, because sometimes artists like to leave that up to the audience, and they don't necessarily want to direct or tell the audience how they should feel at the end of it. But it's a question that I ponder and I check as I curate and pull together the programme for Earthrising. I think that when we look at citizen attitudes and behaviours towards the climate crisis, there's pretty much, consensus now amongst the general population that climate change exists. It's real. It's not a fallacy. So it's happening. But how people react to that reality is different. So some people are deniers, and deny that it's as bad as people make out, or they don't really believe the how strong the data is, or the strength of the kind of predictions by scientists. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got doomers who are really bought into it and just think, oh my God, it's so absolutely terrible, and we're heading towards the apocalypse, so that's just too hard for them to kind of get their heads around with. So they just go into a doomer mentality, and it's too hard to face. What's interesting about both of those two attitudes, whilst wildly different, the behaviour demonstrated by both of those groups of people, is exactly the same. They do nothing. They're stuck. So your denier does nothing, your doomer does nothing, because they're just paralysed by the fear and the anxiety of it all. I think the stage that we're at with the earth crisis, I feel I have a responsibility to speak truth to the reality of the situation that we face, but also try and leave audiences with a sense of hope and optimism, that all is still not lost, that there is still hope, there is still time, there is still stuff that you can do. And I think the power of art and creativity it's a hugely powerful medium to imagine new futures, to imagine new realities, because I think we need imagination activists. We need a new sense of imagination of what a different reality might look like. And I think art and creativity is a powerful way to try and do that. I also think art and creativity brings people together. And I think we need that sense of communion and collective, because very often, I think especially, the world right now feels very challenging and very dark. We're not only dealing with an earth crisis, we're dealing with, the demise of democracy in countries around the world, where the rise in AI technology, global health scares, the risks and the crises are multiple. And I think very often as humans, our reaction to that can be to feel a sense of isolation, to feel powerless, to feel fearful, anxious, angry. And I think art institutions and cultural institutions and moments like Earth Rising can be really powerful antidotes to that feeling. They can help you reconnect with yourself and with nature. They can help through creativity, help you to imagine a new possibility, a new future, and also feel like you're part of something bigger than just yourself and feel part of this communion, this community. There's a project called the 89% Project, and they've done research globally that shows that anywhere between 80 to 89% of citizens around the world believe in climate change, but feel like they are on their own, that they are feeling this way on their own, and that they're not in the majority. So imagine the potential of unlocking that and helping people to realise actually you're not in the minority, you're in the majority. Sorry, I said that the wrong way around. They feel that they're in the minority, that they're on their own. So there's a huge potential to unlock that and make people realise actually most people feel the same way as you. And imagine if we all came to that realisation and all started to work together and collaborate and communicate. The power of that could be quite significant. So I am very familiar and very aware of the dire straits that we face, but I still see a lot of hope and optimism and potential for the future.
Fantastic, thank you. And I would say that moments like this can help as well.
Absolutely.
I would like to see artist perspective in this discourse, and especially in your practice, that is specific practice, that is based on ecology, and specifically in the NCAD field, in which you explore the urban commons, that is very close to what we are talking about now. How do you approach communicating this embodied place-based practice, experiment, in a way that resonates beyond the participants? And if you can tell us about your project, because maybe...
Sure.
Thank you.
Not to be too smart or glib, but yes, occasions like this. And to kind of fall back, the people that do the course, it's so embodied, immersive, it's hyper-social, it generates a real sense of like togetherness, I believe. And also it's all towards kind of this commoning of knowledge, commoning of experience, pooling experience. So that kind of gives us the opportunity to actually walk the talk and be this rhizomatic theory in action, this rhizomatic, Deleuze and Guattari's model of like rhizomatic learning, rhizomatic experience, rhizomatic organisation. So first and foremost, it is the way our participants of the course, our learners, branch out through society. We're very lucky we attract like fantastic young people and fantastic learners, postgraduate learners who aren't just artists, which is kind of, refreshing, frankly, to teach and to guide and to learn. So they kind of interface with their own worlds, to go back to their own worlds, and hopefully bring a kind of mediation of this type of work with them, and not just a kind of mediation or a representation, but practice. That they can work within their institutional, personal, professional lives to impact some kind of change. Just to kind of introduce the field where I teach, NCD field, it's a weird and wonderful place that's directly beside the college on Thomas Street. It's a storied place. It would have had many, many past lives. When I was in college there 20 years ago, it was derelict. And indeed, I remember, I think it was the summer of 2000, a lot of heroin users were taken out of there. Well, 2 or 3 heroin users were taken out of there, having OD'd in the place. So it's a place. It's a site of trauma as well. And And then sometime in the last decade, an inspired students' union, a visionary retired businessman named Tony Loud, and other members of the community took it upon themselves in radical act of care to clean up this space, needle by needle, and then guerrilla compost it. So it then became a haven for urban horticulture, and then it fell into disuse, and then it fell into radical disuse over the pandemic. And this is where it went wild. It wilded itself. I was teaching sculpture on Zoom during the pandemic. This is not a good thing to do. It's not a good course to deliver. It's not a good course to receive. But we did what we could during those times. So there was a real appetite for face-to-face learning, and there was a real appetite to activate this space. And then Sarah Glennie also really wanted to bring kind of critical ecological thought and action urgently into the courses we run in NCAD. So we got to meet. We were one of the few courses that got to meet face to face in this weird and wonderful garden that was a garden but was no longer a garden. I described the place as being post-ordeal. That's to say, it's not primordial. We weren't dealing with primordial soup. We were dealing with somewhere where lots of stuff that happened, and now we're there with the debris of it. And in terms of what we found there, it was just remarkable. We found, a wonderful kind of mix of flora and fauna. Things going feral, kale introduced by hipsters. Now, beyond, the hipsters are gone, right, more or less. But the kale kind of self-seeding and going feral. Beetroot never touched by horticultural hand, doing its own thing. And then just kind of lots of other exotic species. And then kind of apex predators, 2 urban foxes and a peregrine falcon that's in the steeple. So this kind of spoke to a kind of complexity and an intelligence of the place that evolved independent of human hand. And from that we evolved terminology around this, which was kind of like, what do we call this place? It's no longer a garden. So it's we came upon the term novel ecology, and this was like supported by Dr. Marcus Collier down in Trinity, who does a wonderful project called Novel Eco, which is looking at these ecological habitats, contexts that have no analogue in other habitats or ecosystems. And very definitively, we have a novel ecology in our hand. We're not just beholden to that term because we're an art college. It's, as I said, it's a semi-structured space. So it's important to have an ability to be ontologically diverse. So we're really enjoying this primordial or post-ordeal state because students come upon it or learners come upon it, and they have to engage with it. They have to engage with these debris. They have to, so this brings like Anat Singh's theory of like how to survive in capitalist ruins into relief, like how to work there. So we're very, very fortunate with this kind of space that we're now running 5 years at undergraduate level. And that's a fully accredited course that happens 80 to 90% outdoors in all seasons. So students really plug in phenomenologically, but also phenologically. Phenology is how plants and species kind of present themselves in the environment, when certain things bloom or whatnot. My mind is on the pear trees ripening on the Digital Hub tree right now. That's how we introduce the course. Students come back, they pick pears from this venerable pear tree that's 170 years old. They make jam together. They get their fingers sticky. This is a kind of rite or tradition or ritual that really situates their learning in this place, in the Liberties. And I remember the first time we did that after the pandemic, the course was like, what's wild, what's domestic? I thought the field was wild. I thought jam was domestic. But we had a female sparrowhawk hunting, like, for the whole day that we were in the field. And this was just kind of magical. This was kind of really enchanting, and it kind of radically transformed my experience of what I should be doing and how I should be learning in the space. So much so that if we do stuff in that space where we can't attract a female sparrowhawk, we've failed somehow. We've once more disenchanted something. So how do we? Sorry, I'm gone off on that particular tangent. How do we communicate this? Yes, the students that have this really valuable, and I would say personally transformative experience of living and learning together in this space. But we're also increasingly really well networked. So internationally, we're part of the Internationale Museum of the Commons. There's a climate assembly there. These are kind of quite large institutions, a confederation of large institutions across Europe that want to pool knowledge and directly tackle biodiversity and cultural crisis, or biodiversity and climate crisis. You know, and I'm quite motivated by that, because they acknowledge that representation of the images within the existing conventions of the art world are not enough. Reaching the existing audiences of the art world are not enough. So I'm quite interested in that remit. We're also part of, this is a really unfortunate name, but it's the SpaceX RISE consortium. This is another, that stands for Spaces of Art and Architecture and Empathetic Exchange. So we're involved in that. It's another kind of network which is looking at the commons and the necessity, the critical necessity to actively occupy this space. Like, neoliberalism is a dead donkey. It's now being colonized by a far right faction and narrative. And SpaceX, sorry about the name, SpaceX is really about countering that. So that's another thing we're networked into. What we find with the garden, the space like the field, is they're disarming, they're immersive, they're environmental. You can bring in different constituencies of people and work together side by side and kind of dig in, and we do that in all sorts of novel ways. We've also kind of presented at in contemporary art context, science context, in Trinity and symposiums, and we have a symposium coming on scale in the college in the middle of October, another symposium in Coventry forthcoming. So these are quite large kind of institutional relationships, which are really, really important to build legitimacy around the place like the field, so that this is not a meanwhile space, this is not a flash in the pan, this is not an interregnum before the field gets developed into something else, we hope. This is a real site of learning and exchange and knowledge production, critical knowledge production. And it's the fact, again, it happens outdoors, is immersive, phenomenological, and it lets us court all these wonderful discourses around decolonization and also kind of queer ecology. We can really, really, experiment with these theories and generate real and tangible praxis for learners and for ourselves in the field. So that's all really quite rich. And then finally, again, to create the field is a commons, it's an experiment in the commons, but the commons is not a free-for-all. It's not open access. It's not public space. The way I describe it to students is the difference between the commons and a public park is, go to a public park, try and dig a hole. See what happens. What's going to happen? Try and climb a tree. You might get away with climbing a tree in a public park, depending on where you're. The commons, you can do those things if they're negotiated and they have no radical impact. So there's a bit of an initiation that happens into the space. At undergraduate levels, it takes 6 weeks. And then they get their kind of freedoms and agencies within the space, because the kind of primary thing to do is observe and understand and get to know, empathetically, as you said. And then after that, we move from Donna Haraway's entanglement, let's call it, into Tim Ingold's correspondence. So what are you going to do here? How are you going to interact here? So we're doing that. We're trying to get the field to function within the institution, because the institution is community. And NCD's been here over 40 years. We're part of the Liberties, part of the community. Some of us are very transient and foolish commuters coming from the four corners and trains. But we are part of the community, so we need to kind of work it out how it works with ourselves, primarily. But then there is, of course, being porous. We're not an ivory tower. How do we open up to other constituencies, other publics, other communities? And we've done that in different ways with our kind of potato growing of non-EU registered potatoes, an active age group relationship. We've had seed saving events. We've had a wonderful exchange with Belfast, with community growers up there, and interfacing them with community growers in the Liberties, and the field is kind of holding space for this kind of encounter. And I'm pleased to say, the college has landed a big north-south co-create funding application that will see us working acutely with Belfast School of Art, but also all sorts of kind of growers and communities. And this is a kind of a shot in the arm we need to kind of bring horticulture back to the field, because but not just horticulture. We don't want to be a project that just grows vegetables for the sake of it, even though that's a meaningful and enriching process. We still have to kind of honour that kind of critical ecological edge that we've been honing these last few years. So
that's fantastic, definitely. And talking about tension between different concepts, how institutions can interact with social and ecological issues. From the low carbon approach that VAI is having, and the initiatives like the payment guidelines and now the Bill of Rights, how do you interact, and how do you sorry, I'm looking for the right word. How do you intersect the sustainability part of VAI with your social commitment and showing the labor that is not visible to be visible, and what is the outcomes? What is?
You kindly sent me the question before, so I kind of have. I spent a lot of time wondering how the hell I'm going to answer it, to be really honest with you. And I thought of I'm old, so when you read out all those things about me, there's no merit in them. It's just I'm an old person. You collect things along the way, and sometimes you discard them.
Sure.
But many years ago, before I joined the art world, and very early in my job, I decided I would only work for ethical companies. It was quite popular in the early 80s. We had cranks serving us cardboard, which they called food, and we had cheesecake, which, wow, it was quite something. But what was interesting was trying to actually live that in a corporate age of the 80s and Thatcherism, Reaganomics, and so on. But actually, it was possible. It wasn't too problematic. And I asked some of the companies I was working with, because I was traveling around the world, can you just put me in one place, please? Don't put me in a concrete hotel. Put me in a village. I want to live in a village and work from the village. And in village life, I got involved with the conservation and rejuvenation of 2 rivers. One in Dorset, which had a very unfortunate name, the River Piddle, look it up, and the Nimram in Hertfordshire. Both of them were suffering from humanity. Both were suffering from water abstraction from industry, but also they were suffering from very nice people who were growing vegetables, having cattle, having horses, breaking down the riverbanks. So the river starts to expand, the water starts to slow down, everything starts to get stagnant. So we went in and, narrowed the river and so on. But the reason I was thinking about it reminds me an awful lot of the art world. It's not controversial to say that we all have problems with the bureaucracy surrounding just trying to be an artist or trying to run an art space. And this is not something that's raised as part of the conversation about the climate or the planet emergency that we're facing. Because nobody identifies that we are resources, our time is energy, and we are wasting it by feeding a bureaucratic machine that is being built around us on a daily basis. Every funder has a requirement. Every time you do something, you have compliance. That is part of the planet emergency that we are facing, because that is eating into resources in a very different way. Now, that all sounds great, but what are we doing about it? The good news is that in in my other part of my brain, when I stop sort of romanticizing about the River Piddle, I do talk a lot about systems and redesigning our systems. And so the first thing that we have done from a VAI point of view was we looked at our bloated systems. And actually only in the last month we've finished another aspect of our bloated systems where we looked at our website. Our website was 40 gigabytes of storage out in some place, somewhere or other. It was Siobhan, who worked with us, knows that we were holding it together with sellotape, some rubber bands. We were making it do things that, it was never designed to do. All of that, infinitesimal use of resources, but a use of resources that we can control. Our website is now 1 gig. Did it in a week. It was not a problem. It was not a difficult thing to do. It's just we had to think about it. Where this all starts to fit, though, in the kind of, payment guidelines in job seekers allowance, is that the website is part of one of the 11 measurements that we take of VAI, and there are 11 measurements that are based on the UN sustainability goals. We measure everything that we do against the UN SDGs or SDGs. I hate using acronyms because they alienate people, and if we're talking about inclusion, it's how are your SDGs, who cares? But it's really important to us. And when we look at the SDGs, I was actually then thinking about here, if we look at this bloated bureaucracy that we are having to live within, that's wasting our time, wasting our energy, let's look at SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. There's an awful lot of talk out there about well-being. There's an awful lot of talk out there about everyone's health and well-being is of vast importance. Have you seen evidence from any of the large corporates that they're worried about your health and well-being apart from some sort of advertisement? If they did, you wouldn't have to fill out a form of 10 or 12 or 75 pages in the EU's thing. They will be working on systems that actually make things completely accessible to you. So we have to actually wake up and realize that an awful lot of the projects, an awful lot of the initiatives, an awful lot of the policy that's being put forward is ticking a box. Now, I would never dream of telling a person that their project is only ticking a box, because guess what? It's virtue signaling back to them. It is also calling them out. So we work on a collegiate basis. We go to them and saying there is a better way of doing this. If you want, we can help you on that journey. Sometimes they listen to us in the Culture Action Europe environment, for example. We managed to sort of get systems changed that had impacts, for example, in the Netherlands and so on, just by simply having the conversation of, we share the journey with you. We are listening to your voice. We may not agree with what you say, but you have a voice. We're not devoicing you. We're not cancelling you. You have as much right to your opinion as I have to my opinion. So let's listen to each other. And that's a very important space that VAI is creating for artists, as well as bureaucrats, as well as people we engage with. So SDG also talks about reduced inequalities. So an inequality of, why are you paid and I'm not paid? I thought that we had actually won the race to getting artists the right to be paid. It's not true. There are so many loopholes still out there that we actually find that we're having to remind people now that they have the right to be paid. And that's how the Bill of Rights project came. The Bill of Rights project came not to create anything new, but actually to remind people of what we've achieved since 2011. Because there is a massive amount of rights that artists don't know they have or have forgotten. The other thing then is obviously sustainable cities and communities. If we're not expending our energy, feeding a bureaucratic machine, we have time to make, we have time to create, and we might even have time to do a bit of gardening as well. Even though it's not gardening, it's something else. I'm old. I can't keep up with these postmordial things. It's a beautiful garden, but this is VAI's point now, is that look, we don't exist for anyone else except artists. We're there to support. We're there to give voice, but we're also there to listen to the many different voices. And what we hear is, I'm tired, I have no energy, I am stressed out, I can't believe the amount of stuff I have to do just to. And this is crazy. So at the moment, an awful lot of our conversations, if you look on our website, it's a little bit, you go into about, then you go into our policies, you'll find our green journey. Look at our green journey action plan. There's only one of them in red. Some of them are in orange, some of them are in green. There's only one in red. And that is the duplication of effort required in making funding applications. That is, and that is published. We're saying it loud to everyone. We need to do something about the bureaucratic nature of the arts. Because as an arts organisation, and Gavin, you'll probably know this as well, I spend 80% of my time filling out forms and reports and 20% of my time with artists. When I joined VAI, I was out on the road 80% of my time listening to artists' sense of isolation and needed supports and so on. 80%. I'm now 20% of my time available to artists. There's something wrong with this system. And we have to push this back. So when we hear about initiatives of, mental health, well-being, etc., and these are coming from policymakers, let's ask the policymakers what they're doing in order to actually do it at a practical level, not just a policy. I was talking to somebody who will remain nameless, but is a very good friend of mine, who is leading forward on a very good action policy area at the moment. And I asked, how are you getting on? She said, brilliant. All the people who believe in what I'm doing are all on board. But it's made no bloody difference because the people who don't see themselves aren't listening. So we have to make people see themselves. And we have to show them the absurdity of spending so much money and so much effort on bureaucratic processes, whilst at the same time saying, I hope your mental health is okay. I hope your well-being is okay. Are you using a lot of electricity? One of the things in VAI that we also did was we were doing a lot of investigation in terms of, what was our green journey going to be. So we got in contact with various agencies, Creative Carbon Scotland, Julie's Bicycle. Julie's Bicycle we really enjoyed because actually Julie's Bicycle is named after one of my favourite restaurants in London from the 80s. So I kind of was on a real winner there. It was kind of like the ultimate yuppie restaurant. And here was this green company coming out of there. I was kind of good, this is daft. But anyway, so we chatted and we started analysing what they were doing. And what was interesting was all of them were doing great measurements. They could tell me, or they could teach me how to calculate how many kilowatts of energy I was going to be using. They told me I needed to get rid of the light bulbs. Actually, they told us that we had to get rid of all the halogen light bulbs in the office. They're really bad. And at the same time, we had to buy halogen heaters. We were sitting, could we not just actually turn on the lights? Because believe it or not, it's insane stuff. But it was all about measurement. Show us your electricity bill. Show us your water usage. So we rejected it all. Because we said, look, that's measurement. How do we change? So Siobhan was with us. We went through every process in the organisation. The van, the joke of the van is you can eat it. It's so, the paper is I can't remember the exact thing, but it's not only fully recycled, but it's actually the material that's recycled. The ink is vegetable-based ink. The paper wrapping it's actually biodegradable. We have to use it by a certain date, otherwise it'll actually rot in the office. We changed everything. We were told you have to appoint an ambassador in your organization to take ownership of this. And we were like, absolutely, excuse my language, absolutely no way. It was everyone's responsibility. Every department head. So, yeah, it makes it sound very grand, but every person in charge of doing, whether or not it's the van, the e-bulletin, whatever, was responsible for their area and making sure. So everyone was responsible, and the plan started to sort of like evolve and so on. So with the result, we do an analysis every now and then. At the moment, we are not so good because we can't control the electricity in our building. We can't control the water in our building. We can't control the heat in our building because we rent from Templebar Cultural Trust. And we are advocating is the polite word to them of, would you mind doing something about, changing your energy supplier and so on. And sometimes we may as well be talking to the wall, and other times we can be sort of like get a massive breakthrough. So we're doing what we can. But who we went to was Glasgow School, because they have a sustainability department. And John Thorne, who leads it, we brought him over and we listened to him. So he turned around and said, don't change your light bulbs, because they have a life expectancy. When they become obsolete, consider doing it. Don't consider, throwing things out for the sake of it, because when they come to obsolescence, then you are actually doing something about the planet. Because we all know the great sort of like scandal of GDPR, where everyone threw out their databases and then they realized they didn't have to. This is another example of wastage. But then in the middle of it, we're also talking to artists. So Get Together on Monday is about materials and methods. And John has brought some artists over, and we're going to talk about a variety of things, including Shona Illingworth, who has an amazing film that I saw recently about the tension of air and the ownership of the air around us, from the military and all sorts of aspects to it. But when we're talking to the 3,500 members of VAI, those who are on the journey are coming to get together. Those that are not on the journey don't see anything at Get Together for them this year. So we've actually almost had to go to them and say, there's an awful lot more going on. Come, you'll be able to network, you'll be able to hear somebody, but they just hear green. So they're the worst ticket sales of any Get Together, because we've decided to go green. Now, don't tell the Arts Council that, because they'll kill us. You're not allowed to have a negative story. And that's another aspect of, we're allowed to have negative stories. We learn, not according to funders. But so, like, I left the office, we've sold 300 tickets. At this stage, we would have sold 450. So, it's still healthy, it's still good. But there is a St. Augustine type thing. Oh, Lord, make me holy, but just not now. I chatted to an artist recently, and I said, materials are really important, but we have to look at materials from the point of view of when we change a material, what's the longevity of the material? What's the archival quality of the material? Is the material going to actually serve us, or actually, like, we have a book in the office which is absolutely brilliant. It's a kind of cyanotype recipes. But one of the toners they use, we joked with the landlords that what we'd like to do is set up rabbit hutches on the roof, because we need to collect rabbit urine, rabbit droppings, and rabbit straw to make toner for our cyanotypes. Of course, he laughed. But, that's the extreme. But on the other side, the new materials that are coming along, we don't know the longevity on them. We don't know we don't know whether or not the work that is being made is going to last into the future. So these are questions that we have to force to the manufacturers of the new materials and say, tell me what the archival quality or the longevity is of this. And certainly then we will be on a journey with you. So there's a lot, it's complex, but the interesting thing is that when you see it, that it is not just about a green journey to do with, composting or your materials. It's actually to do with how you work during the day, the decisions you make, and it should become integral to what you do. And then you interact with the people and bring them on the journey with you.